I will show you how to prepare for and conduct usability tests in 3 simple steps: plan, perform, and summarize. In this video, we'll focus on step 1, plan. Usability testing is a process of evaluating a product or a service by testing it with users. It can provide us with multiple insights, not only about the already implemented solutions, but most importantly, about designs and prototypes. It can save us a lot of time and resources to detect the issues early before the implementation takes place. Even though it may seem like usability testing is really time-consuming, performing it and fixing issues at the early stage is always less expensive than implementing the wrong solution, releasing it, and correcting it later on. The planning stage is essential for usability testing because it sets the foundation for the entire process. It guides you and your team through it, and it ensures that you have everything prepared in advance. In this stage, we will create the hypothesis and set goals and non-goals for the test. Define the target audience and characteristics of the participants. Write a test scenario. Create a prototype or prepare a product path we want participants to follow. To keep the whole plan in one place, we need to create a document that contains all the information we need. I've created a usability testing plan template that we will fill out today step by step. You can find the Notion link in the description of this video so that you can follow along and use it in your future usability testing. Also, we need a product to plan a usability test for. Since we're already in Notion for the research template, let's stay here and use Notion AI as an example. It is a new Notion feature that helps you create better content. You can summarize things, translate, improve your writing, fix spelling and grammar, change the tone, or even draft the ideas with AI. It is accessible via the command palette. The first section of our usability testing plan is background. We need to provide context about the usability test. We need to briefly describe the scope, which areas of the product are included, and in general, why we want to perform the test. In our example, the test will focus on the new Notion AI feature and how it integrates with the existing flows. We hope to gain insight into how users are interacting with the feature and identify what needs improvement. The scope of the test will include the AI feature and areas of the application that are affected by the functionality. The next section is objectives. Here you need to determine the goals for the usability test and what you're trying to achieve. For example, you may want to detect the usability issues, measure time it takes for users to accomplish the task, or the general satisfaction with the solution. If there are any areas that you want to pay special attention to, here is also the time to list them. So for our example, we will list 3 objectives. The first one is verify if command palette UI pattern is intuitive for the users for the AI functionality. The trigger, working with the palette, and coexistence of 2 command palettes in the editor. The second one is validate if users understand and see the use case for the commands included in the palette and their categorization. And the third one is identify usability issues when working with the generated prompt, approving, refining, and exiting the experience. In the next section, we need to define what is out of scope, what are the non-goals for the research, what this research isn't meant to achieve. In our example, it would be just one thing, gathering feedback about the outputs provided by the AI. This part is a separate testing module. I assume that for this usability testing, we're testing only how people interact with the interface, not necessarily if the prompts and the output of the AI system is correct and satisfactory for them. Then we have the research questions, the specific questions that our usability test is meant to answer. It is important to distinguish that those are not the questions we want to ask our testers, those are the research questions. Students usually ask me about the difference between the research objectives and research questions. The research objectives are the high-level goals that we've defined a moment ago, whereas the research questions are more granular and they contribute to those goals. I usually recommend to define between 3 to 10 questions, and for our example, I've defined 7. The first one is, are the triggers, so spacebar and Ask AI button, for the AI feature intuitive and work well with the existing command palette trigger? Do users notice and understand the trigger hint, which is press / for commands and space for AI? Is the grouping for AI commands intuitive and not overwhelming? Do users know how to interact with different types of commands? Select text and run AI, generate with AI without input, provide input to generate. Is the list of drafting options too long? Are we providing too many options? After generating the output, do users find actions like replace, place below, discard, etc. intuitive? Do they have issues with exiting the flow? Is each tone of voice clearly labeled, and is anything missing? Then we're moving on to methodology and tools. How are you going to perform this research? Will it be moderated or unmoderated? Will it be in person or remote? You need to also consider the tools that you will be using. In our case, it will be a remote moderated usability test using Zoom and live product implementation. Participants will receive special test login credentials to access the testing environment. Now let's move on to participants. Here you need to identify the characteristics of the people you will invite to the test that align with your target audience. It's better to focus on behavioral characteristics, also the experiences, and anything that is relevant to the test. Also, you need to identify how many people you want to test with here. In our case, the test will be performed with 6 participants that meet the following criteria. Existing frequent users of Notion at least 3 times a week, people who use Notion to create long-form content like articles, blog posts, etc., and people who actively use Notion as a planning tool in their organization. They write meeting notes, email drafts, summaries, etc. Now let's talk about the compensation. Here you need to specify if your participants will be compensated, and if so, how. For example, with cash, gift cards, or some gadgets. The compensation depends on your company budget and the niche that you work with. It is important to add it to the usability test plan because you will need a sign-off from some stakeholders on your budget. And in our test, it will be a $100 Amazon gift card. The next section is schedule. Here you need to determine when you're planning to start the outreach and perform the usability test with exact dates. And in our case, it will be outreach between May 4th and 6th and usability testing between May 9th and 14th. And the next step is to develop the test plan. Here we need to determine what tasks people will be going through during the usability test. In our case, I would like to split the usability test in 2 parts. In the first part, people will be working with the blank slate to generate the blog post. And in the second part, they will be working with existing text to refine it and write the summary. So let's take a look at the list of the tasks. The first one is to trigger the Notion AI to write a draft of a blog post. Then I want them to refine the draft using the Notion AI by improving writing in one paragraph, shortening one paragraph, brainstorming ideas about one of the paragraphs, and changing the tone of the article to more professional. And the third task is to use the custom AI blog to generate a scenario for 20-second social media video about this topic. Here I want them to use the custom AI blog, which is the most free form and the most difficult in my opinion, and I want to observe how they behave with it. And then we're moving on to the second part of the usability test, so work on and review the meeting notes, which are already present in the system that are pre-prepared. The first thing is to ask AI to generate action points from the meeting, then to ask AI to summarize the meeting for you, and the third one to simplify the language of the summary. The next section is prototype or product path. Here you need to attach the link to the prototype that you've prepared, or a screen recording of the steps in the real-life product that you're planning to take the users through. It helps your teammates visualize how the test will look like and what are the steps. The next section will be the scenario, and I would like to share a tip with you. So I recommend working on the prototype and scenario in parallel. It is easier to come up with the prompts, and you're avoiding making the mistakes like forgetting about the parts of the prototype or not having smooth transitions. And the last section is the script. Here you need to write down exactly what you will say during the meeting, from the introduction through questions up to the wrap-up. I've also added to the template some notes about how to create the script. So the first one is don't help or make suggestions. Even if the participants are asking things like, am I doing it right or should I click it? Stay neutral and encourage them to explore by themselves. The second one is to ask the follow-up questions about the interactions and encourage them to think out loud. You can say things like, was it difficult to find? Or was this what you expected to see after clicking the button, etc. And the third note is to avoid general questions and talk about their experience. For example, instead of asking, is it a useful feature? Ask, if it was available today, would you use it? How would you incorporate this feature in your current workflow? Let's move on to the introduction. Here you need to explain the process and ask them for permission to record. I will read the parts of the introduction and comment on what is important in them. So it starts with hi and introductions, and then you say, thank you so much for joining us today. Your feedback is very valuable to us and will help us make our product better. So it's important to thank people for spending their time on the usability test. Then we're going to say, today we'll focus on testing new functionality we're about to add to the system. It's a usability test. It means that our objective is to learn about what works and what doesn't work in the currently designed interface. So you state clearly why you are performing this research and what's the objective for them as well. Then you will explain the process briefly. We will ask you to go through the testing version of the product that I will share a link to in a second. We've prepared tasks we'll ask you to go through. Please try to comment out loud as we progress. There are no right or wrong answers. It is not a test of your skills, it is a test of the product. If something is not clear, it means we need to make changes on our side to make it useful. And here I want to express that this is not the test of their skills and we are not judging them as a user. If anything is wrong with the test and anything goes wrong, it is important for us and it is important insight that we will implement in the product. And then you ask for the permission to record the call. We would like to record this call so that we can refer to it in the future and we don't have to take the tons of notes. It will not be shared with anyone outside of our team. Are you okay with it? If they say yes, and you say thank you. If they say no, it's also fine. You can then write the notes. And then you wrap up the introduction. This will be about 30 minutes long. We'll start by chatting about some general questions about you and your day-to-day. Then we'll dig deeper into the tasks. We'll have some time at the end as well for any questions you might have for us. Let's start. So you also mentioned that if they have any questions, there will be time for them to speak up as well. Now let's move on to the warm-up questions. They are designed to make the participant feel more comfortable and for us to gather some general information. We can ask about their role in the company, how long have they been working there, how long they have been using our product, and how often do they use it and what they use it for. Now let's go through the tasks, so the core part of the usability test. We need to guide the tester through the path that we've prepared. Also, we need to ask the follow-up questions and remind them to think out loud. So let's go through the prompts and questions. We start with, let's imagine that you would like to write a blog post today. To start, please create a new blank page. So basically, I'm setting the scene here for them to be working with a blank slate. And then we have some questions here. Do you notice any changes in the interface comparing to your usual experience? And we want to guide the user to the AI tool by hinting it. So I would assume that they would notice the different hint, but if they don't, you can guide them slightly to it. And there's also a note here to guide the tester to open the AI command palette and comment on what they see. So I want them to do a little bit of an exploration by themselves and share the first experience. I can ask them things like, what would you expect from something? Or how do you understand certain elements? Just a brief introduction to the flow so I can see how they work with the command palette without me giving them any tasks to do yet. The next task is to generate the draft of a blog post using the AI tool. A blog post is about 6 exercises writers can do to write better content. So the important thing here is to give them the topic. You're not asking them to think any more than they need to think. And it actually mimics the scenario better because usually when they start a blog post, they would know the topic of the blog post. So it's on you here and you're focusing on the interactions only in consequence. Then I guide them through the refinement part. Now let's try to refine the blog post. And the first one is, some sentences in the first paragraph could be improved regarding the structure and vocabulary. How would you improve it using the AI assistant? And here, of course, you need to choose the good paragraph from the text that was generated by the AI. So this is just an example. And you need to ask the follow-up questions as they go through the task, but this is the main prompt. The next prompt is, the third paragraph is a little lengthy. Could you try to make it shorter using the AI? Very straightforward. The following one, let's imagine that you would like to add more content to the third exercise. How would you go about generating more ideas about this topic? Here I want to make them generate the ideas about the content, but I also want to make it feel very organic, very natural, as if they were actually generating content for the blog post. And the question number 4 about refining. After reviewing the whole article, you came to the conclusion that the tone is a little too informal. How would you correct it using AI? So as you can see here, I'm also setting the scene here and trying to bring them into the world as if they were coming up with those ideas. I don't go with just straightforward asking them, please change the tone, because it doesn't really feel natural in the test, and it is quite important to keep the results as objective as possible. Now we're moving on to the last task about the blog post. Could you use the AI to generate a scenario for 20-second social media video about the same topic? Here I'm prompting them to use the custom AI block. If they don't go this path, I can also guide them with follow-up questions and suggestions so that they stick to that prototype or stick to the path that we've planned. Now I'd like to move on to the second part of the test where they will be working with already generated content. And I can say something like this. Thank you. Let's now transition to the second part of the test. Could you please open the page called Meeting Notes? So I'm being open about me wanting to transition to the second part of the test and what they need to do to go there. Then I set the scene again. Those are the notes from your last team meeting. Please use the AI to generate action points from the notes. Very straightforward, but at the same time, I'm giving them the scenario as if they were the user. The next task is, now let's imagine that you need to send a summary to your manager. How would you generate it with the help of AI? So again, I'm setting the scene. I'm not just giving the dry task. After they've generated the summary, I ask them, the summary uses complex structures and advanced vocabulary. Could you please simplify it using AI? And of course, it may be a little awkward because the summary may be really simple already, but it's just a test and it's completely okay in this scenario. Now that we went through all the tasks, we need to wrap up the session and ask them if they have any follow-up questions or thoughts. We say something like this: thank you, those were all the tasks we prepared for today. Is there anything you'd like to add before we close the test? Any thoughts or questions that came to mind? So we ask them to speak freely about anything that came to mind that they didn't have a chance to speak about yet. We need to answer those questions then. Then you say, your insights have been very informative and will help us correct the design. How did you like the experience of usability testing? So basically here you're reinforcing that you're thankful for the insights and for their time, and also you want to gather a little bit of feedback about the experience of the usability test. Then you move on to the next part. Would you be interested in participating in similar studies and other research in the future? We're continuously working on improving the product, so you invite them to the future usability tests, and you're also building your base of users that are interested. And if yes, that's great, and you say then that you will add them to the list of participants and will contact them as soon as there is some opportunity for testing. And the last sentence is basically, thank you again for meeting us today, it was a pleasure. Don't hesitate to contact me directly if you have any further questions or thoughts. So basically you're opening the communication with the user again, but you're also wrapping up the session in a nice manner. Now that you're ready with the prototype and the script, you need to test it. First, do it by yourself. Go step by step through the whole scenario and make sure that you have all the transitions ready and that you haven't forgotten about anything. Then invite your colleague to rehearse it with you. Invite them to the Zoom call, ask them to share the screen, record the meeting, and go through all the tasks without exceptions to make sure that everything works before you go to the actual usability test. In this video, we've covered all the essential steps to plan a successful usability test. Remember that planning is crucial because it lays the foundation for the whole process. In the next video, we'll focus on steps 2 and 3, perform and summarize. We'll talk about how to conduct the usability test, how to analyze the results and make the recommendations. Remember to subscribe so that you will not miss out on this next video. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you soon.